There are moments on live television that no producer can plan, no script can predict, and no host can prepare for. What happened on a warm Thursday afternoon at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta would become one of those moments, the kind that stops everyone in the room cold, that makes a seasoned host forget his next line, and that leaves an audience of 200 people holding their breath in complete silence. Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud for over a decade. He had seen laughter, tears, awkward answers, and emotional reunions. He thought he had seen everything this show could throw at him. But when 4 one-year-old Linda Mercer stepped up to the microphone that afternoon, Steve Harvey, the man with the fastest wit on television, suddenly went completely silent. Because what Linda said next wasn't just an answer to a game show question. It was the truth she had been carrying alone for 3 years. And she chose to say it live, in front of the whole world. Linda Mercer was 41 years old, a licensed practical nurse from Columbus, Ohio. For 16 years, she had worked back-to-back shifts at a community hospital. Caring for patients who couldn't care for themselves, she was the kind of woman who remembered her patients' grandchildren's names, who stayed past the end of her shift when a family needed someone to explain a diagnosis one more time, and who brought homemade cornbread to the break room on holidays so the overnight crew wouldn't feel forgotten. She had married David Mercer 18 years ago. They met at a church fundraiser in their neighborhood. She was running the baked goods table. He was the man who bought 3 slices of her sweet potato pie and came back the next Sunday to ask for her number. They built a life together in a modest 2-story house on the east side of Columbus. They had 2 daughters, Kayla, 15, and Brianna, 12, and a dog named Biscuit who destroyed exactly 1 pillow per month. From the outside, the Mercer family looked like a picture of quiet, steady American life. David worked in logistics for a regional shipping company. Linda worked her shifts, kept the household running, helped with homework, coached Brianna's soccer team on weekends. They weren't wealthy, but they were stable. They had a plan. Save for the girls' college, maybe take a family trip to the Smoky Mountains next summer, replace the kitchen tiles they had been meaning to fix for 3 years. What nobody outside that house knew was what Linda had discovered 3 years earlier, on a Tuesday night in January. While David was on a business trip and she was paying the household bills, she found a credit card statement she had never seen before, a card in David's name only, with a billing address that wasn't their home. The charges told a story she hadn't been prepared to read: hotel stays, restaurant dinners, weekend trips to cities David had supposedly traveled to alone for work. It wasn't one mistake. It was 3 years of a second life running quietly alongside the one they had built together. Linda did not confront David that night. She sat at the kitchen table until 2 in the morning. Then she went to work the next morning and took care of her patients the way she always did. She carried what she knew the way she carried everything, quietly, steadily, without showing the weight. She told no one, not her mother, not her best friend, not her pastor. She stayed in the marriage because her daughters were 12 and 9 at the time, because she was terrified of what the truth would do to their world, and because she didn't yet know how to leave without destroying everything. The Family Feud appearance had been David's idea. He had always wanted to be on television, always been the one who called out answers at home during the show, always said they should apply someday. It was the first thing in years that had genuinely excited him. And Linda, even knowing what she knew, had agreed to go. She talked. LD herself, it was for the girls, who were thrilled beyond measure. She told herself it was just a game show, but somewhere in the back of her mind, something else had been quietly making a decision she wasn't fully conscious of yet. The Mercer family arrived at the studio on a bright Thursday morning, dressed in their matching blue outfits, David in a button-down, Linda in a navy blouse, the girls in coordinating tops. They looked exactly like what a Family Feud family is supposed to look like: warm, photogenic, enthusiastic. During the pre-show interview with producers, David was the one who talked the most. He told the story of how they met, got the producers laughing, mentioned the sweet potato pie. Linda smiled and nodded and let him lead the way she had been doing for 3 years. The game itself started well. The Mercers were competing against the Bird family from Memphis, Tennessee, and the energy in the studio was electric. Steve Harvey was in full form, quick with the jokes, warm with both families. Working the crowd, the Mercer family won the first round, then the second. The girls were jumping up and down. David was pumping his fist. Linda was smiling, clapping, performing the version of herself that the audience expected. They made it to fast money. As the higher-scoring player, David went first behind the partition. He did well, scoring 143 points across his 5 answers. clean and confident. When he came back out and joined the family, he was beaming. He hugged Linda. He kissed her on the cheek. The audience cheered. Linda felt the kiss land on her face like something cold. Steve Harvey walked Linda to the Fast Money podium himself. He looked at her warmly, the way he always does, like he genuinely wants whoever is standing there to succeed. "Linda," he said, with that deep, steady voice, "your husband got you 143. You need 57 points to win $20,000 for your family. You ready?" Linda stood at the podium. The studio lights were bright above her. The audience was watching. The cameras were rolling. Her daughters were somewhere in that audience, sitting next to their father, waiting for her to do something wonderful. And something shifted inside Linda Mercer, something she hadn't planned, hadn't rehearsed, hadn't consciously decided, but that had been building for 3 years. Through 1,000 quiet mornings and 1,000 longer nights, finally rose to the surface and simply refused to go back down. Steve Harvey held up the card for the first question. "All right, Linda, 20 seconds on the clock. First question, name something a wife might hide from her husband." The question hung in the air for a half second. In that half second, Linda looked at the camera. Then she looked at Steve Harvey. And instead of saying a survey answer, instead of saying money or shopping or something light and laughable, she said, in a voice that was completely calm and completely clear, "How much she already knows." The studio went quiet in a way studios almost never go quiet. The audience, which had been warm and buzzing a moment before, simply stopped. Steve Harvey's face, that expressive, theatrical, always ready face, went still. He looked at her. She looked back at him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Steve blinked. He glanced at the card in his hand, then back at Linda. "I'm sorry, say that again for me." "How much she already knows," Linda said again. Same voice, same calm. A wife might hide how much she already knows. Something on Steve Harvey's face changed in that moment. He had interviewed thousands of people. He had heard thousands of answers. He knew the difference between someone going off script for a laugh and someone saying something real, and what Linda Mercer was doing right now was real. He lowered the card. He stepped a little closer to her. The clock had stopped. The producers in the booth had quietly paused the game, though no announcement was made. Steve spoke quietly, in the voice he reserves. "For the moments that matter, Linda, talk to me." And Linda talked. She spoke slowly and clearly, the way she speaks to families at the hospital when she needs them to understand something difficult. She told the studio and through the cameras, the country that 3 years ago she had found evidence of her husband's long-running infidelity. She told them she had stayed silent to protect her daughters. She told them she had come to this game show today partly for her girls and partly because, standing at that podium with the lights on her face and the whole world watching, something had finally told her that silence was no longer protecting anyone. She said she didn't know what happened after today. She didn't have a plan. She just knew she couldn't stand at a microphone and pretend anymore. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She did not look toward the audience where her husband was sitting. She looked at Steve Harvey, and she spoke the truth in the same steady tone she had used to say good morning to her patients. For 16 years, Steve Harvey, who has made his reputation on having something to say, said nothing for a long moment. He simply stood with her. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped to something quiet and private, even in front of 200 people. "I don't know what's going to happen when you walk off this stage," he said, "but I want you to know something. Linda, what you just did took more courage than anything I have ever seen on this show. You could have given me money and won the round and gone home. You didn't. You told the truth, and the truth always costs something, but it is always worth it." The audience, which had been silent, began to respond not with applause at first, but with something quieter. The sound of 200 people exhaling at once, then a low wave of recognition, and then applause that built slowly from the back of the room forward, the kind that means something different from the kind that follows a punchline. Steve turned to the audience and the cameras. He spoke simply. "This woman came here today to play a game, but life had something else in mind. I've been doing this for a long time, and I can tell you I have never seen anything like what just happened. This is what real looks like. People. This is what brave looks like." Behind the partition, producers quietly spoke with David Mercer. He was escorted from the studio without incident. The girls, Kayla and Brianna, were brought to a private room with a producer and a counselor on staff. Linda was with Steve when someone came to tell her the girls were safe. She nodded. She thanked them. She remained, in every visible way, completely composed. Steve Harvey put his hand on her shoulder. "You got daughters watching you right now. he said, and what they just saw their mother do. They're going to carry that for the rest of their lives, not the game show. This what you just showed them about what it means to stand in your own truth. Linda finally let out one long breath. For the first time since she stepped up to that podium, her composure gave way. Not to tears exactly, but to something softer, like relief. She pressed her hand to her chest and nodded slowly. I didn't plan this, she said quietly. I think I just couldn't not say it anymore. The episode aired 6 weeks later, after extensive conversations between the producers, the network's legal team, and most importantly, Linda herself, who gave her full and deliberate consent to air the segment. She was not a victim of an unexpected broadcast. She reviewed what would be shown. She made her own choices, the way she had been making her choices all along, quietly, carefully, and entirely on her own terms. The response when it aired was immediate and overwhelming. Clips from the moment circulated across every platform within hours. By the following morning, Linda Mercer had become one of the most talked about people in the country. Not because she had done anything sensational, but because she had done something that millions of people recognized as profoundly honest. Comments poured in from women who said they had been in the same silence for years. From nurses who said her composure reminded them of why they went into caregiving. From daughters who said they had shared the clip with their mothers. From men who said watching it had made them look at it, their own choices. Steve Harvey addressed it directly on his social platforms the day after the clip went viral. He wrote simply, I've had a lot of great moments on that stage. This one changed me. Linda, I'm proud of you. It became one of the most shared posts he had ever made. For Linda, the aftermath was not simple. Telling the truth on national television does not resolve a marriage or a life. It only begins the process. She and David separated within weeks of the episode airing. The divorce proceedings were difficult, as they always are. There were conversations with the girls that were the hardest conversations of Linda's life, harder than anything she had said on that stage, harder than anything she had carried in silence. Kayla, the older daughter, cried for 2 weeks and then told her mother she was proud of her. Brianna took longer, but she came around. Linda returned to her nursing shifts. She went back to remembering her patients' grandchildren's names, to staying late when families needed her, to bringing cornbread for the overnight crew. Her colleagues treated her exactly as they always had, with the quiet respect of people who had always known who she was. A few of them told her they had watched the clip. One older nurse, who had been in the field for 30 years, stopped her in the hallway and said, You did the thing the rest of us were too scared to do. Linda said, I wasn't sure I was brave. I think I was just out of quiet. 6 months later, Family Feud followed up with Linda in a segment that Steve Harvey introduced by saying it was one of the most important follow-ups we have ever done. Linda appeared on screen looking rested and clear-eyed. She had moved into a smaller house with the girls, one without the kitchen tiles she had been meaning to fix, but with a backyard where Brianna could practice soccer. She spoke about the divorce, about rebuilding, about the specific challenge of being a public figure in your own neighborhood when you have never asked to be one. She also spoke about something unexpected, the volume of messages she had received from women, in situations like hers, women who were carrying knowledge they had never found the words for. Some of them had reached out through the hospital, where she worked. Some had found her through mutual connections. Some had written letters that were forwarded through the show's producers. She had answered everyone she could. She told Steve, I don't think I did anything heroic. I think I just did something that was time. But if it helped somebody else find their time a little sooner, then it mattered. Steve Harvey, watching from the studio stage, was visibly moved. When the segment ended, he stood and addressed his audience directly. I want to say something about this woman. She didn't come on our show to expose anybody. She didn't come looking for fame or sympathy or a headline. She came to play a game show with her family, and life handed her a question she had been waiting 3 years to answer. And she answered it. That's courage. That's not drama, that's dignity. The Mercer girls adjusted over time, the way children do. Not without pain, but with the particular resilience of young people who have been shown what honesty looks like up close. Kayla, who wanted to be a teacher, wrote a personal essay for her junior year English class about the day her mother stood at a podium and told the truth. Her teacher gave her an A and told her it was the best essay she had read in 15 years of teaching. Brianna, still quiet about IT and the way 12-year-olds are quiet about the things that matter most to them, started a journal. She wrote in the front of it, in her own handwriting, Say the thing when it's time. A year after the episode aired, a counseling nonprofit in Ohio that works with women navigating separation and divorce, reached out to Linda to ask if she would be willing to share her story with their clients, not as a celebrity, but as a peer, a woman who had been through something similar and come out the other side still standing. She agreed. She drove to their office on a Saturday morning in February, sat in a circle with 11 other women, and talked for 2 hours. She said later that it was one of the most meaningful mornings of her life, more meaningful even than the day the clip went viral. She still works at the same hospital. She still brings cornbread for the overnight crew on holidays. Biscuit. The dog has destroyed 2 throw pillows since the move, which is a slight improvement over the previous rate. The kitchen tiles in the new house remain unfixed, but Linda has decided she likes them that way. A small, manageable thing she gets to choose to fix whenever she's ready. When journalists asked Linda what she would say to women in situations like the one she had been in, she thought for a moment before answering. She said, "I'm not going to tell anyone what to do. I don't know your life. I don't know your children, your finances, your fear, or your faith. What I will say is this. The truth doesn't stop being true just because you're not saying it. It sits with you. It costs you something every day, even when you think you've gotten good at carrying it. And at some point, the cost of staying quiet becomes higher than the cost of speaking. That's the only thing I can tell you. Know what it's costing you. And when the cost gets too high, say the thing." Steve Harvey, in a later interview, was asked what moment in his television career had affected him most. He mentioned several significant guests, powerful interviews, surprising contestant stories over the years. And then he paused and said, "There was a woman, a nurse from Ohio. She came to play Family Feud and she answered a question nobody had actually asked her. And the whole room went quiet because everyone in it recognized the truth when they heard it. I think about that moment more than I think about almost any other moment on that stage, because it reminded me what television can actually be for. Not entertainment, not ratings, not a laugh. Connection. Real human beings telling each other the truth. That's the thing. The clip of Linda Mercer's moment on Family Feud remains. Years later, one of the most watched segments the show has ever produced. Not because it was dramatic in the way of manufactured television drama. There was no shouting, no confrontation, no theatrical breakdown, but because it was undeniably, uncomplicatedly real. A woman stood in a bright studio under studio lights and said the thing she had been carrying alone for 3 years, in the same calm and steady voice she uses to care for strangers on the hardest days of their lives. And the whole world recognized something in that. Not her story specifically, but the shape of it, the weight of a truth held too long, the particular relief of finally letting it go. She didn't win the $20,000 that day. The round was never completed. But Steve Harvey, speaking with producers after the taping, quietly ensured that the Mercer family was connected with resources to support the transition they were about to go through. That part was never televised. It didn't need to be. Some things are just decency done without cameras. Years from now, when Brianna is old enough to explain it to her own children, she will probably say it simply, her mother went on a game show. She stood at a microphone, and she told the truth. The rest, as they say, followed.